It is 5 o'clock. It's time to start. So, Bill Halsey, would you lead us in a prayer? Amen. So, the what? So, oh, Cody can make all the comments he wants. My speech, Cody hasn't seen this. That's okay. That's fine. So, I didn't hear everything that Chip talked about this morning. So I was on the door, I was going in and out, I couldn't hear, and he was telling the story about the police, and I thought, well, I have a story too. And it's related to this, sort of. So earlier this year, Joanne and I went up to Minnesota. One of her relatives was having he just called it a barbecue, but it was actually, I think, in the celebration for their 40th anniversary. And while we were there, we went and saw her stepmom in a new facility that she's living in. It's just a bunch of retired people. Some of them need medical assistance, some of them don't. But is it 2 hours away? It's 2 hours away from the cities, and we stayed in Minneapolis. And on the way home, it was a good day. Had a good time, met a lot of people, a lot of her new friends that she really loved. Oh yeah, somebody used to live here, and you really wanted to talk to us. Anyway, as we're leaving, well, actually it was sometime down the road, but it's a couple hours away from Minneapolis, and there's a lot of little towns that you have to drive through. So you drive through a little town, you drive the speed limit, you leave town, and the speed limit keeps increasing, and then you get to another little town and it decreases. You pass through and speed limit increases. Well, about halfway between Wilmer and Interstate 94, I look up and I see some flashing lights. Oh no. So, because I understand what to do, and I'm assuming everyone here understands what to do when you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror, I pulled over. And he was actually after me because he pulls up right behind me. Because when I saw him, he was like a half mile back, and I just pulled over anyway because I was speeding. So when he gets up there, he says, you know why I pulled you over? It could have been something else, so I just said no. And he told me how fast I was going, and I was speeding, and I'm pretty sure he was right on the money. And so he asked, so where are you going? And I just said, we're going back to our hotel in the cities. So being in Minnesota, having a license plate that says Arizona, because we drove our own car, and telling him that we were going back to the cities, to our hotel, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming because he was a smart police officer, and I was very respectful when I answered him. And I already had all that information that I knew he was going to want out because I been stopped before. He went back to he took my driver's license, and I don't remember what else he wanted to see. He didn't want everything. He actually only wanted 2 out of the 3 things. I don't remember what they were. I had my driver's license, my insurance, and vehicle registration. And he took my driver's license, and he went back to his car, and he came back and says, okay, I'm just going to give you a warning. He didn't even give me any piece of paper. So I'm going to give you a warning. Just slow down. And And I went off on my merry way, and I tried to ensure that I was following the speed limit, at least within a couple miles an hour, all the way back to the hotel. This is actually related to the class tonight. And this is basically the same verse that I had last week. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Now, how did I know or have a good idea, besides past experience? For those of you that never been stopped before, if you see a flashing light behind you, what do you know to do? Yeah, pull over. And if you didn't hear what Bill said, Bill said, pull over and hope that he goes by. I understand where he's coming from. Now, if things turned out very well, because I understood that I was subject to his authority, and him having the authority, he had the authority to not issue me a ticket. There's no law in the state of Minnesota, and there isn't one here in the state of Arizona, that says when you're stopped by an officer, you're getting a ticket. There's some discretion on his part. He has some authority to issue a ticket or not. He also has the authority, if I had not been respectful and had done everything I wanted, or that some people think that they can do to push the limits, he could have, if I had given him reason, he could have asked me to get out of the car. And depending on my responses, he could have put me in handcuffs. And I have seen on videos where officers were that had to draw their service sidearm and defend themselves. All of that could have happened, but it didn't. Now, let's say that I was totally respectful. I got out of the car and he started beating on me for no reason, at least in my eyes, that I know of. What was my recourse if that had happened? No, after the beating and after I got out of the hospital, what would have my recourse been? Yeah, so you said filed charges, I could have sued. Where would we find the authority for me to do that? Where would we find the same authority for the officer to pull me over? The law. And it's the law within the jurisdiction that you're in. So in Minnesota, there's a law that says for speeding that the officer can pull me over. And it's the same thing in here in Arizona. If I was nice and things went, and even though as respectful as I was, things had gone awry and I ended up in a hospital, the same authority that makes gives the lawmakers in the state of Minnesota the right to make laws. It says that these officers in the county or in the city, or whatever they call it in Minnesota, have the authority to do this, but not the authority to do this. So the people that we look to as being authority figures, like police officers, if you have a house fire, the fireman that's on scene there has authority. If you're if you have a problem with trash pickup, who lives in the city? Okay, so you get trash picked up at least one day a week, sometimes twice. If you have a problem with trash pickup, who would you go to? To the city. It depends. Because within the city, we have city pickup, and if they don't come for a few days or come for a few weeks, we're on city trash, or I would call the city. I wouldn't call the county. I wouldn't call the people that I know in the state house. You call you, yeah. So there is some authority, and the authority is you'll find at the state level. You find that in the state constitution. In the state constitution, it gives the lawmakers or the legislators the authority to make laws. It gives the executives in our state government I'm sorry. That's why I shouldn't be when I was in the Army as an instructor and they tell you not to do certain things, that was one of them. Well, anyway, so the authority for the officers, the authority for me to call if I have a complaint about the officers, the authority for the city to charge you for trash pickup, the authority for me to call the city when they're not doing their job, it's based on words that you find in the state constitution. The federal government does not handle trash pickup. They may be trying to do that, but they've not done it yet. So how would you define politics? Okay, that is. So for the people that don't know, Joanne and I are involved in politics. I would call myself a politician. I don't know if Joanne would call herself that, but what's that? But usually, when there's, because I've heard it in here. I've heard when government is mentioned, or politics is mentioned, or politicians are mentioned, it's not done in a good light. So I just want to point something out. And I have to thank Cody and Tony and Chip and everybody else that does classes, because I'm involved in politics, when I hear some of the verses that we have for classes, I'm thinking, oh, that applies to X, Y, and Z in the government, and X, Y, and Z in our relationship with government, and government with us. So just, if you turn to 1 Peter 4:11. When you get there, would someone please read that? So, I was baptized on March 2nd. Prior to 2009, I was not involved in politics. And I remember once my mother called me, or I called her. It was one of the two. But it happened to be during an election cycle. And she asked me about what I thought about what I just asked you. And instead of saying it the way that Harold did, I actually told her. And I probably shouldn't have said it to my mother. But it wasn't very nice. But when I look at this, when I heard it in one of the classes, if anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. I thought about that time and how we view politicians, how we speak about politicians, how we view our government, and how we speak about our government. Many times I will have conversations with people about things that are wrong in our government. And eventually they stopped talking to me about it because my solution for them to fix it is for us to fix it. Anyway, so last week, let me see if I got the right slide. Can you read that? I'll tell you what it says. The headline says, election by the numbers. This was published on ABC News website on November 7th, the day after the election. It says that the 113 million people turned out to vote, 33 seats flipped, 110 female winners, and $5.2 billion were spent. And last week, Tony made I think it was Tony, made a comment about how much money is spent and how hard it would be to, well, he didn't say it that way. But generally when I hear people talking about the money that's spent in our political system, it's about how hard it would be to fight that. And I hear people, so last year I talked to one of our state legislators from our district. I talked to a legislator a state senator from one of the northern districts, and I talked to a lobbyist from the Arizona Citizens Defense League about about Article 2, Section 32 out of the Arizona State Constitution, and how I would either like it repealed or changed. And after talking to the senator, one of the things that came back to me was that in one case, the lobbyist said that the people that they talked to, the lawyers, thought it was all right. Joanne? Okay. So this is in the Arizona State Constitution, and it's been in the Arizona State Constitution since we were founded as a state in 1912. It says, the provisions of this Constitution are mandatory unless, by express words, they are declared to be otherwise. That's right, by who? So, nope. So there have been instances that you can look at. Earlier this year, I can't remember what the initiative was, but if you look at we can change the Constitution two different ways. One's through a referendum, and that starts in the state legislature. The other is by a citizen initiative. If you went around in some of the parking lots this past year, if you went to a gun show, if you went to the Pima County Fair, there were people outside gathering petitions to get an initiative put on the ballot. And some of the initiatives changed the state constitution. And in the state constitution, when initiative passes by a vote of the people, the state legislature and the governor can't do anything to change it. The only thing that the state legislature can do is to further the cause of that initiative. So one of the initiatives that's been passed in the, I don't remember what year it was, it said that by so many percentage points that funding for a certain, it's not all the schools, it's a certain account. And I don't remember, I think it had to do with teachers' pay. It said that it had to happen every year. And that was one of the lawsuits that was initiated that ended up giving us Prop 123, which passed 2 years ago. Anyway, so the legislature can't change it, the governor can't change it. So what does that mean? Well, earlier this year, I heard a story, and when I heard it, I should have wrote down the particulars, but the Arizona State Supreme Court overturned an initiative. So, and I don't remember what cause or what justification they gave, but Article 32 of this says, or Section 32 says that provisions of this Constitution are mandatory unless by express words they declare to be otherwise. And I guess the otherwise and who is the court. Well, I wanted to get that. It's in the Constitution. Yes, it is. But, so in the Constitution it says that the governor, at least in the case of initiatives, the governor and the state legislature can't do anything about it. They can't change it. All the legislature can do is to enhance the objective of the initiative. But so that was one of the things that the reason I even brought it up is because one, consulted lawyers, and the lawyers were okay with it. Go figure, because what does lawyers want to be? Judges. The state legislator said that the language of it is okay, and we could put forward a referendum to have that stricken or changed, because I had given her language either to get rid of it or to change it. There's one other state in the union that has language like this, but where it says that unless by express words they had declared to be otherwise, in that state, and it's one of the eastern states, it says unless the state legislature changes it. So it's a representative of the people, not judges. And that's put in words. So what in this Constitution has been overturned by judges? There is, I hear all the time, people talking about term limits for federal legislators. There was a referendum, and I don't remember what year, it's been in the last 20 years, or maybe 25 years. A referendum was put forward that limited the amount of times that the member of the House of Representatives or United States Senate, the limited amount of times that their name could appear on a ballot. And that's in here. It is in here. That was overturned by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you for clarifying, because we do have a Supreme Court here in Arizona. The initiative that I was talking about before, that was the Arizona Supreme Court that overturned it. So let's see, where am I going with this? Oh, how much it cost? The $5.2 billion. So you probably can't read the words down at the bottom. It said number includes spending from candidate campaigns, party committees, and more than 3,200 outside groups, including super PACs, that's political action committees, and political nonprofits, which have reported spending at least $1.3 billion. And that's an increase over the 2014 numbers. That's how much was spent this year in 2018. There's a lot of money. So there is the thought that you can't fight the money. In some cases that may be true, but I think we should try. And there are ways to do it, but that's not for this class. He can, but when he does that fighting, will it be through us? Let's see. Turn to Psalms 26:10. Somewhere. Well, I'm going to start reading from 8. And this is out of the NIV. Lord, I love the house where you live, the place where your glory dwells. Do not take away my soul along with sinners, my life with those who are bloodthirsty, in whose hands are wicked schemes, whose right hands are full of bribes. That's related to the slide. That $1.3 billion, not all of it, but some of it is used to entice people to, well, what it's used for is, who got mailers for this political season? From candidates, from political action committees, from political committees, and what's that? Or a shredder. I only shred them because my address is on it. So some of it, or much of it, is used to convince people to vote a certain way. And many times, there are candidates, they're not going out and saying, vote for me, like this. But they make promises. In one of the state constitutions from the 1780s, it was Pennsylvania, I think, it said that if a candidate offered a bribe for a vote, that he couldn't run that year. It also said if a voter accepted a bribe from the candidate, they could not vote that year. Well, I said that part right. The candidate that offers a bribe cannot run that year. You have to be caught, of course. And so a lot of money that is spent is because it's either to misinform or inform or bribe voters for your vote. I don't know if you read any of it, but listening to some of the TV ads, the radio ads, some of the things that you read in newspapers, and on the flyers that you get, they're bribing people to vote for them. Have you ever found yourself considering voting for somebody because they were promising you, what's that? Yeah, or insurance, or there's a lot of different things. So, turn to Psalm 33, 10 and 11. So I think it's just this past week that Cody brought this up in Psalms class in Bible 101 for the people that don't go. Psalm 33, 10. Cody, would you read this for us? 10 and 11. And in the notes that Cody provides for us, do you remember what you had there for this verse, these two verses? What are they? Did you write that in your Bible? Okay. Nations write plans, but God writes history. So before I move on to her, let me add, who votes? Who's going to vote after they register? After they register. I know there's some people here that are too young to vote right now, so they didn't raise their hands. Go to, let's see. First, so there's two of them. So some of you turn to 1 Corinthians 10:31. And some of you turn to Colossians 3:17. And whoever gets to the 1 Corinthians 10:31, would you go ahead and read that?
Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God.
And Colossians, for whoever went to Colossians 3:17. Bless you. Yes.
Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to his name to God the Father.
So, like I said, because I'm involved in politics, when I hear some of the verses for the classes, I automatically go to politics. And when I heard this, and I don't remember who did it, I thought about voting. So for those that think that this might apply to voting, how does it apply to your vote? Or does nobody think that this applies to voting? So what I remember from the class that I don't remember which verse it was. It's one of the two. They're similar. It was when I think it was Mark, or maybe it was Cody, or Tony, or Chip. I don't remember. Anyway, in this verse, they talked about what you do at work, and how what you do at work should be for the glory of God. Whatever you do, and this in 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. That would. So, how do you prepare? I'm just asking for opinions because that's not in here. In giving glory to God when you vote, how would you do that? Tony?
Well, you know, Christians are supposed to display and act upon certain ethics of 12%, right? And so, in order to be a good citizen, and fulfill our role as a part of the 7,000 people, 5 people, we should know the what the people involved to possibly make a sense of God, right? And then understand and weigh the values of those decision processes so we're bringing about the good to the people and the vote to the word of God, the word of God.
Anybody?
Perfect notion that people are very important. And a lot of times people show up whether they have some issues, a lot of times they end up being voted to the lesser of two evils.
I heard that.
If you get into the presidential election, you could write in somebody, so it's kind of like hopefully whether
Anybody else? So should you also, when you're considering your choice for a candidate, the person that you're going to vote for, look at their qualities. As Christians, we're supposed to be examples of certain qualities. Is it possible? And it must be possible for people around us to observe those qualities, since that's what we're commanded to do. And so you should be able to pick up on those qualities when you're considering people who you're going to put your check mark next to. So one of the things that you were talking about is picking the lesser of two evils. You were talking about the general election. Who here does not vote in a primary election? You don't have to raise your hands. I've met over the years, and I've only been involved in politics for 9 years, I've met a lot of people that don't vote in the primary. And then that's when you end up having a choice between the lesser of two evils. So and some of you know this, but every person that I supported for federal office at the federal level, I know that they were Christians. I didn't know it at the time. And at the time, until recently, it didn't make any difference to me. But I noticed that they were in 2009 when I started supporting Jesse Kelly. He was a Christian. He didn't even campaign on Sundays. He went to church. His family went to church. If people wanted to do things for him on Sunday, he was okay with it. But him and his house, they went with the Lord. Went and worshiped him on Sundays. Another gentleman that was supported for the United States Senate was the person that ran against Senator Jeff Flake, who, from hearing many, not exactly from this crowd, but many people that I know who are registered Republicans thought that the person that Joanne and I were supporting, everything that he said sounded great, but he can't win. So they voted for the other guy. And whether you think the Senator Jeff Flake has done what he should be doing for the state of Arizona, it doesn't matter. He's the senator, and he deserves our respect and our honor. But I'm just relating to you that how he ended up making it through the primaries is not because of, in some people's opinions, the best candidate for the state of Arizona. So we're talking about voting, but what about? So how often do you get to vote? Well, I mean, how often do you get to vote for someone that's going to be? According to the authority, well, actually, it's just this one. So if you didn't know, this is the, although this has a little bit of authority on voting, this one determines when or who's qualified. In the Constitution, it defers to the state the qualifications of electors. Now, we have had amendments that have passed the 15th, 19th, the 24th, and the 26th, which says that no matter your previous condition of servitude or race or color, what sex you are, your inability to pay poll tax, or, 18 and over can vote. Those are the amendments that says that these people are allowed to vote. But the state constitution could actually, if we wanted to, could be changed so that non-citizens could vote. It could be changed so that the age is lowered to 16. That's left up to the state. So this is Article 2, or Article 1, Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. The most numerous branch in the state of Arizona is the state house. And in this Constitution, in order to register to vote, you have to be a United States citizen, resident of the state, and the residency requirement is spelled out in state law. It's not in the Constitution, and you have to be 18 years or older. This Constitution can be changed so that non-residents, they are wrong. So, there are many things that the Supreme Court rules on, but the authority is the words that are in here. The reason that the decisions of the Supreme Court are allowed to stand when they butt up against the Constitution is because we allow it. The people, I mean. There's nowhere in the Constitution of the United States that gives the authority for any judge to say whether or not something is constitutional in this or in this. It's not in here. What made it? It's not law. What made its standing precedence is a court case, Marbury versus Madison, and that involved the court saying that they had judicial review over the things that they had judicial review over. It's not in the Constitution. So the reason I'm pointing this out is because of let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, where there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. The So that officer that I was talking about earlier, that if things had gone awry, his authority for doing what he could have done is in the state constitution. The authority for, let's use a local example. The authority for the United States Congress to determine how federally controlled land is used is in the federal Constitution. And we have to know, like I knew, that I should pull over when I saw those lights. We have to know, like I knew, that he's going to ask me for my driver's license, the vehicle registration, and possibly insurance. And so I had all that out. When we pick people that are going to go into those offices, in Article 1, the legislature, they're going to be making laws. In Article 2, it's the presidency. He's going to be enforcing laws. In Article 3 is the judiciary, and we don't get to vote for them. That is picked by the nominee is picked by the president and is confirmed by the Senate. And those are things that we should know. And when we're considering the people that are going to fill those seats, that I didn't drop the mic. When we're considering those people that are going to fill those positions, we need to consider their character, their qualities, their history. They should be willing to come and meet with you, to speak to you. There are candidates that I know of, and unless you tried, you wouldn't know. But there are candidates that won't come and speak to groups like this. And I know people that are holding office that would come. I've seen Sheriff Daniels, who is an executive in the county. He's responsible for keeping the peace. I've seen him meeting with 2 ladies at Landmark Cafe on a couple of different occasions. They just wanted to speak to him. He goes and speaks to large groups. He goes and speaks to small groups. There was one day when, was it on a Sunday or a Wednesday? When we were driving by the Lutheran church and the cars were all parked over there. It was a Wednesday morning. He was there speaking to our group. So that's an indication that they're willing to talk to you and shake your hand, find out what you think, what your concerns are about government. One of the things that, and I tried to put this up last week, and I didn't include it in the slides this week. One of the qualifications that we should be considering is, do they know the authority? We're supposed to know it when we're driving down the street, when I go up to the state capitol, I have to leave my gun in the car. Yes. And there are other instances that Joy and I have run into over the years where the people running for federal office don't know what's in this, and the people running for state office don't know what's in this. I can tell you that this year there was a person that was running for the state house, and one of the first questions I asked her was about the state constitution. She said, "I got one in the car and I've been reading it." That was the person I voted for. That, and we had other conversations, but. So in order for us to keep out of trouble, stay out of jail, not get beat on, or if we get beat on, to use our authority to straighten that out so somebody else doesn't get beat on, we need to know the words and the authority that's in the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Arizona. You also need to know what it says if, like me, I don't fly. Joy and we don't normally fly anywhere. We drive everywhere. So when we drove to Minnesota, we checked out the state laws on carrying concealed in all those states. And Joanne and I both got Nevada state concealed carry permits because our Arizona permits aren't good in Minnesota. And that's from knowing what's in their state constitutions. Actually, I haven't read the whole state constitution, I've read portions of it, but there are places where you can go online to find out those things. But we need to keep ourselves informed about that. So, I don't know how long this is going to take. We'll just go to it. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. So thanks, Mark. Wish I'd have said that. I've seen those reports. So there was last week, and I don't remember why it came up, but Hitler was brought up, and it had to do with governing authorities. So I just went and looked it up that Hitler was, I thought Hitler was elected. Hitler was not elected. He was appointed by President Hindenburg. There was an election. Hindenburg won the election, but because their equivalent to their Congress, the Reichstag, was so heavily Nazi Party, Hindenburg appointed Hitler as chancellor. And when Hindenburg died a year later, Hitler became the president, and he, and I don't know if it was under the Constitution, whether it was lawful or not, but he tossed out their Constitution and became a dictator. And the rest is history. And so there was out of Cody's class, Psalms 33, 10, and 11, the Lord foils the plans of nations. He thwarts the purposes of the people. But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever, the purpose of his heart through all generations. And then Cody's comment says that nations write plans and God writes history. And I believe that, and it was said last week, that although we don't know what the purpose was, what God had intended when he put Hitler in power, he did. And there was a reason. Joanne? So the last thing I'm going to talk about, yeah, thank you, Joanne. Sorry. Don't take it out of me tonight. So this is, I know you can't read it. So there's a lot of things I find on the internet. And because of the things that I've been involved with since 2009, I look up things, I find things, and things go away. So I actually cut this out and I pasted it. What it says is, well, the print underneath says, this photograph from the Library of Congress of James McHenry's diary recounts interaction between Franklin, that's Ben Franklin, and Mrs. Powell. And they spent Mrs. Powell's name wrong. It's spelled with one L, because I know. Anyway, so there are many people that think that there's nothing that they can do. What can you do as one person? It takes a lot of money, and I've heard this from people that are politicians. I have not been involved and keep doing what I'm doing because I think it's fruitless, that nothing will come of it. I'm not sure why I do it, but I know there's a purpose, and since I've been coming here, I know that God has a purpose for me. Anyway, this is an entry out of a journal from James McHenry during the time of the Constitutional Convention. It went for 4 months through the summer of 1787, and it concluded in September 1787. What you can't read there, it's on the 18th. On the page on the right, you can see the number 18 there. That's the day after the convention. He made this entry. A lady asked Dr. Franklin, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A monarchy or a republic?" "A republic," replies Dr. Franklin, "if you can keep it." This lady's name is, if you've seen the back of my truck, my yellow truck, the lady here alluded to was Mrs. Powell of Philadelphia. This is a woman in 1787, what could a woman not do in 1787? She couldn't vote. Not in the Pennsylvania Constitution. 1787. So there would have been, and I don't think it's in the Constitution. They may have had a law, but in all of the state constitutions that I read from the period, right here, in all of them, they had a couple things in common. One, you had to be a male. You had to be, in some instances it said 21, in other instances it said a full age. In some cases, you had to be white. In nearly every case, you had to be a taxpayer. Not necessarily a lot of taxes. In some states, it was very little. But you'd have to look at each of the state constitutions. But from what I've read in the state constitutions, they may have been different laws within the state. You had to be male. Anyway, so how was this woman to keep the republic? She couldn't vote. Most people, what do you hear today? Your most important duty as a citizen is to vote. They tell new citizens this. It's in one of their publications, the almanac for, what's it called, Joanne? It's an almanac something. It has a lot of information there for new citizens. It says one of the most important things you can do is vote. So how was she to keep the republic? Well, I don't have a slide for this. But one of the ways that we can change things is not necessarily through our vote. Our vote it is important. But the other things that you can do is what happens between November 6th of this year and whatever date it is in November in 2020, in our next election. You can go to meetings. You can meet people that are in elected office. You can meet people that are holding administrative positions. Some of the information that I've gotten from people are holding administrative positions. I was back when Tom Crosby was on the city council, I was his pick for the Citizens Advisory Commission. And whenever they tasked us to do something, people from the city would come in and give us briefings. So some of them have left now, but some of them still recognize me when I go in to talk to them. I can go and talk to them. I can go in and sit down with them. Like I said, last year I tried with that section out of the Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 32. Tried to see what I could do to get it changed. I met with one of our state legislators who's going to still be in the state legislature next year. I talked to one of the people at Arizona Citizens Defense League, and he talked to their lobbyist, and their lobbyist came and talked to me after he had gotten some answers. And then there was another state senator that I spoke to who is from one of the northern legislative districts in the state. I actually made an appointment. I drove up to, not Washington, D.C. I drove up to Phoenix, sit down, and I spoke to her. I spoke to her about that, and I spoke to her about something else, and right now I can't remember what that other thing was. But it is possible to do. You don't have to spend all your time considering or trying to meet with people who are holding federal office. It's just as important to meet with and hold accountable and to know what their authority is with state constitution with the school board, or actually called governing board. Joanne? Thank you, Nat. And it has to do with speed limits, no, or roads. Cody? So, Mark. So we're past time, and there were some other things I want to talk about, but I want to just make a point about Mrs. Powell, the woman that Ben Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it. Oh, by the way, Are we a democracy or are we a republic? We're a republic. No, it's because Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution of the United States said that the United States should guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. If you look at all of our founding documents, there's democracy in there nowhere. There's the democratic process, and the democratic process, it actually leaves up to the states to determine who's eligible to vote. Anyway, so Mrs. Powell, this woman who could not vote and who could not hold office, she wrote a letter to George Washington, November 17, 1792. This is at the end of George Washington's first term of office. I'm just going to read part. In her own handwriting, it's 6 pages long, and in single type, edge to edge on this piece of paper, it's that long. So I'm just going to read you a couple of parts out of this. So she writes to him, after I had parted with you on Thursday, my mind was thrown into a train of reflections in consequence of the sentiments that he had confided to me. For though they were not new, yet I had flattered myself that a nearer view of the consequences that would probably ensue upon your quitting a trust, upon the proper execution of which the repose of millions might be eventually depending, would have pointed out to you the impropriety, or to use a stronger word, the impracticability of carrying your intentions into effect. What George Washington had confided into with Mrs. Powell was that he was not going to seek a second term of office. So less than a week later, so he talked to her on Thursday. She writes him this 6-page letter. In it, so this is sort of a third of the way through. She says to him, the Anti-Federalists would use it as an argument for dissolving the Union and would urge that you, from experience, had found the present system a bad one and had artfully withdrawn from it, that you might not be crushed under its ruin. That in this, you had acted a political part. She's saying that the Anti-Federalists, who did not like the federal government under the Constitution, wanted to dissolve the Union. She goes on, I will venture to assert that at this time you are the only man in America that dares to do right on all public occasions. You are called to watch over the welfare of a great people at a period of life when man is capable of sustaining the weight of government. You have shown that you are not intoxicated by power or misled by flattery. So this is at towards the end. God grant that your mind may be so enlightened that you may, on this occasion, form a true judgment, and may the eternal disposer of human events watch over your welfare. That's her 6-page letter. This is a woman who cannot vote, could not hold office. But so Joanne and I went to a convention in Philadelphia in, I think it was 2013. It was actually in the Powell House. The Powell House is not famous for Mrs. Powell. It's for her husband, who was the mayor of Philadelphia. But she and her husband had died during the smallpox outbreak in Philadelphia, and she stayed there. The Washingtons had asked her to leave. She wouldn't. She stayed there with her husband. So she had influence with George Washington. She also had influence with the other founders. If you Google Mrs. Elizabeth Powell, there's a lot more on the internet now than when I first heard about her back in 2012, I think. There's a lot now. And so this woman who could not vote used her influence with George Washington. Also, some of the other founders, that's how she knew to ask, did you guys give us a monarchy or a republic? She knew because the convention was a secret. It was during the summer. They had the place boarded up so nobody could know what was going on in the debates. But she knew because she knew the founders, and she would invite them over to dinner after they got done at the end of the day. So I'm I'm glad that Mark spoke up because essentially what he had said in that first comment was what I wanted to get across, but he said it way better than I ever could imagine saying it. So we're way over, and Cody, would you lead us in the closing prayer?